Hello, friends. Welcome to the Merry Corncrakes podcast. My name is Nathan Hood. I am your host, and this show is the affiliated podcast to the Corncrake magazine. The Corncrake magazine is a fantastic publication. It has several stories from English literature, both by great authors from the past and writers producing imaginative tales. If it sounds like something you'd be interested in, head along to corncrakemag.com and check it out. And today I have a little kind of bonus stream, a little treat for the end of Sunday evening. And we're going to be reading through one of the Corncrake stories from this month's magazine, a little taster of the great the great treasures and riches and just great good stories that are in the magazine. And then we'll have a bit of time for some Q&A if that that sounds good. So I'm just going to so- uh, 1 second. Uh, Hello. It is good to see you both. It is. Um, I am currently. Hello, friends. I am very sorry about what just happened. Hopefully, you can see and hear me now. The Corncrakes must have got into the system. They were attacking the internet connection. They just wanted to have a quiet night's sleep. That we have persuaded them to have one last story before bed. Um, Please let me know if you can see. Yes, thank you, Fingal. Not sure what those Corncrakes were up to. They are mischievous little fellows. But let's get on to this. I will bring up the screen now. So this is called "Hunting the Deceitful Turkey" by Mark Twain. If I zoom in a bit, you should be able to see a bit better. And it's only a page of the Corncrakes. It's not very long, but we will have a little read of it, and then we'll have some time for some Q&A on not just this, any topic you want. So, without further ado, "Hunting the Deceitful Turkey" by Mark Twain. When I was a boy, my uncle and his big boys hunted with the rifle. The youngest boy, Fred, and I with a shotgun. A small, single-barreled shotgun, which was properly suited to our size and strength. It was not much heavier than a broom. We carried it turn about, half an hour at a time. I was not able to hit anything with it, but I liked to try. Fred and I hunted feathered small game, and others hunted deer, squirrels, wild turkeys, and such things. My uncle and the big boys were good shots. They killed hawks and wild geese, and such like on the wing, and they didn't wound or kill squirrels. They stunned them. When the dogs treed a squirrel, the squirrel would scamper aloft and run out on a limb and flatten himself along it, hoping to make himself invisible in that way, and not quite succeeding. You could see his wee little ears sticking up. You couldn't see his nose, but you knew where it was. Then the hunter, despising a rest for his rifle, stood up and took off-hand aim at the limb and sent a bullet into it immediately, under the squirrel's nose, and down tumbled the animal, unwounded but unconscious. The dogs gave him a shake, and he was dead. Sometimes, when the distance was great and the wind not accurately allowed for, the bullet would hit the squirrel's head. The dogs could do as they pleased with that one. The hunter's pride was hurt, and he wouldn't allow it to go into the game bag. In the first faint grey of the dawn, the stately wild turkeys would be stalking around in great flocks, and ready to be sociable and answer invitations to come and converse with other excursionists of their kind. The hunter concealed himself and imitated the turkey call by sucking the air through the leg bone of a turkey which had previously answered a call like that, and lived only just long enough to regret it. There is nothing that furnishes a perfect turkey call except that bone. Another of nature's treacheries, you see. She is full of them. Half the time she doesn't know which she likes best, to betray her child or protect it. In the case of the turkey, she is badly mixed. She gives it a bone to be used in getting into trouble, and she also furnishes it with a trick for getting itself out of the trouble again. When a mama turkey answers an invitation and finds she has made a mistake in accepting it, she does as the mama partridge does, remembers a previous engagement, and goes limping and scrabbling away, pretending to be very lame. And at the same time she is saying to her not visible children, "Lie low, keep still, don't expose yourselves. I shall be back soon as I have beguiled this shabby swindler out of the country." When a person is ignorant and confiding, this immoral device can have tiresome results. I followed an ostensibly lame turkey over a considerable part of the United States one morning, because I believed in her and could not think she would deceive a mere boy, and one who was trusting her and considering her honest. I had the single-barreled shotgun, but my idea was to catch her alive. I often got within rushing distance of her, and then made my rush. But always, just as I made my final plunge and put my hand down where her back had been, it wasn't there. It was only 2 or 3 inches from there, and I brushed the tail feathers as I landed on my stomach. A very close call, but still not quite close enough. That is, not close enough for success, but just close enough to convince me that I could do it next time. She always waited for me, a little piece away, and let on to be resting and greatly fatigued, which was a lie. But I believed it, for I still thought her honest long after I ought to have begun to doubt her, suspecting that this was no way for a high-minded bird to be acting. I followed and followed and followed, making my periodical rushes and getting up and brushing the dust off, and resuming the voyage with the patient confidence, indeed with a confidence which grew, for I could see by the change of climate and vegetation that we were getting up into the high latitudes, and as she always looked a little tireder and a little more discouraged after each rush, I judged that I was safe to win, in the end, the competition being purely a matter of staying power and the advantage lying with me from the start, because she was lame. Along in the afternoon, I began to feel fatigued myself. Neither of us had had any rest since we first started on the excursion, which was upwards of 10 hours before, though latterly we had paused a while after rushes, I letting on to be thinking about something else. But neither of us sincere, and both of us waiting for the other to call game, but in no real hurry about it. For indeed, those little evanescent snatches of rest were very grateful to the feelings of us both. It would naturally be so, skirmishing along like that ever since dawn, and not a bite in the meantime. At least for me, though sometimes as she lay on her side, fanning herself with her wing and praying for strength to get out of this difficulty, a grasshopper happened along whose time had come, and that was well for her, and fortunate, but I had nothing the whole day. More than once, after I was very tired, I gave up taking her alive, and was going to shoot her. But I never did it, although it was my right, for I did not believe I could hit her. And besides, she always stopped and posed when I raised the gun, and this made me suspicious that she knew about me and my marksmanship, so I did not care to expose myself to remarks. I did not get her at all. When she got tired of the game at last, she rose from almost under my hand and flew aloft with the rush and whir of a shell, and lit on the highest limb of a great tree, and sat down and crossed her legs and smiled down at me, and seemed gratified to see me so astonished. I was ashamed, and also lost, and it was while wandering the woods hunting for myself that I found the deserted log cabin, and had one of the best meals there that in my life days I have eaten. The weed-grown garden was full of ripe tomatoes, and I ate them ravenously, though I had never liked them before. Not more than 2 or 3 times since have I tasted anything that was so delicious as those tomatoes. I surfeited myself with them, and did not taste another one until I was in middle life. I can eat them now, but I do not like the look of them. I suppose we have all experienced a surfeit at one time or another. Once, in stress of circumstances, I ate part of a barrel of sardines, there being nothing else at hand, but since then I have always been able to get along without sardines. So that was The Deceitful Turkey by Mark Twain. A bit of a little of an interesting kind of anecdotal story almost, isn't it? And well, I'd be interested in your comments on it. What did you think of it? What effect did it leave upon you? To me, it has a very kind of homely quality and a good little adventure, that kind of captures that experience. I think is quite deep and profound, and at the heart of a lot of existence, where we're struggling on and we're reaching for something. We're reaching for, it could be a number of different things, but let's just say rest or an ideal state. And as soon as we get close to it, it's just slightly beyond us. We just can't quite get hold of it. When we complete a task, we think we've got there, but actually it's just a little bit further on. And this is reflected, I think, in the mountain as well that they're climbing. That it isn't just a flat land, but they're going upwards. There's an ascent here. And often when you climb a mountain, you think you've reached the summit. It's just over the lip of the hill, and then you realize, oh, there's another lip to go, and then another one, and then another one. It feels a little bit like this with the turkey. I guess as well that one thing that strikes me is this is a battle with nature. The turkey is the extension of nature here. She is part of the natural order, while Mark Twain's character, whether it be himself or a character that he's created, he is not of nature. He has a mechanical device, the gun, and he wants to conquer nature. He wants to hunt and defeat it, reenacting, you might say, the old ways of our long ancestors who made their food from from hunting in the wilds. This kind of re-imitation is quite interesting because although for Twain's character, it's a bit of fun, really. In the past, it was life and death, and certainly for the turkey, it's life and death. So there's this kind of strange juxtaposition of the um the fun of the bird, the fun of Twain, the levity of his character, the kind of jauntiness. This is all a game, so much so that he doesn't shoot the bird. Now he says it's just because of his marksmanship, but I think if it was life or death, he would have taken a pot or two. But in this case, there's a sense of no, he doesn't want to be beaten. He doesn't want to have to, because to kill the bird in that way is kind of to admit defeat. At least that's how I kind of see it. Whereas in a hunter gatherer would not mind about that. They just want to get that bird killed. For the bird, it is life or death, and she's trying to protect her young as well. So I think there's kind of interesting dynamics there, and especially with the victory of nature over him. That for you could read this kind of the first thing I was talking about, the always nearly there, but it's just out of reach quality of life and desires, and indeed, some people like Schopenhauer would say only in death do we finally find rest. All of our life is one desire after another. So it could characterize human nature, but it could also characterize man's attempt to conquer nature. And actually, nature, whilst we feel like we can have control of it and we can restrain it and turn it to our will, ultimately it comes back round and overcomes us. We can never truly master it. Perhaps that's also there in the story. Yeah, does anyone else have any thoughts on this at all? I quite enjoyed it. It was very wholesome. Let's while I'm waiting to see if anyone has any further comments, let me zoom out of this. So you can see we have a very nice image for this front cover of the Corncrake nesting in the oak of English literature. Here's the Merry Corncrake podcast, and I suppose this is me as a Corncrake reading stories to you fellows. And let's read something else because we have a bit of time. That was quite a short story. There's our editor's note from Call of the Shield Maiden. And I want to get down to, let's see. We'll move past this because this is quite a good in-depth essay. Let's see. Here we go. Let's try. So Liam QD Hall, he's a more recent fellow. He submitted these poems, and why don't we have a little read of these few poems, and we can have a bit of chat about it as well, and then we'll do some Q&A, or I can talk about some things that I found interesting recently. So, the poetry of Liam QD Hall. Ides. Thence she stood, Oliver's bright sword, a figurehead in amber clad and doffed, halo limbs her crowning treasure tresses, some ancient autumn pillar which blesses. Facing forward unto dawn and toward infinity, in her wings time, hymn chords her poise, her proud eyes memory, and on her lips and brow something words lack, though drawn, and cannot express, though we try anon. Eudaimonia. When I have wept for my ill lot in life, the failings and the lack I'm wont to feel, when I have feared of the turmoil and strife, proud hate, leasings and wickedness of weal, when I have seen malignant love, oft feigned, cry within, and look whither done once deigned, when I have wept for my wretched soul bought, and the fee paid in blood by the most meek, when I have feared my God and him besought, Mine forgiveness and succor did I seek, when I have seen the bounteous display of blessings now, and those rewards which may invoke thus. Death be mortal, great thou art, ever keep thee my soul from old foes' dart. Dragon Hoard. This treasure was hoarded and died upon. It is cursed to any who gaze thereon. For the worm's cunning doth bestir and wake the ill of our heart, greedy to partake of any assurance or mistrust we bear, that we have not enfettered or ensnare. For weak will be any who seek or find the gold, gem, and jewel of the dragon kind. Falcon and Raven. Pluck out mine eye, so I can see the things that will soothe come to be. In the dry desert, slashed by blue, I do this to help those of you. In the frory fjords of the old north, from my doom I try to fight forth. Surreal. Harry the coast, reach for the sky, haunted the ghosts that do not die. Heart in a chest, touched Eidolon, give it some rest, let it be gone. So those were the poems of Liam Q.D. Hall. I think I'll just mention a couple of things that jumped out to me. The first is that we have a range of references, biblical, classical, Norse. So this eudaimonia one, I think it's very clearly talking about the gift of Christ's death on the cross and the salvation that it brings. We could see this in something like, and the fee paid in blood by the most meek. Well, Christ is the meek man who dies on the cross for the sins of the world, for sinners he wishes to save. When I feared my God and him besought mine forgiveness, and succor did I seek. It's quite an interesting word. I've often seen succor in 17th century Christian poetry. It's the rest, it's the satisfaction, it's the bliss that one is seeking. When I have seen the bounteous display of blessings now and those rewards which may. So when I've seen the kind of beatific vision, the perfection of life, which comes from union with God. So this is the thing which he's really seeking here, that the eudaimonia, or the good of his life, of human nature. So invoke thus, death be mortal, great thou art, ever keep my soul from old foes' dart. So who's the old foe who shoots a dart? Well, it's Satan. It's the temptations of the world, which will lead to sin. So death be mortal, great thou art. So this could be taken in multiple ways, I think. Death has been defeated by Christ's resurrection, but also the individual dies to sin and comes to new life. So in a way, death to the old world, death is good. It brings the separation of man from his sinful self, at least in this kind of theological language. So I think that, we could see it that way. So I think this is quite a Christian poem. Then we move on to Dragon Hoard, and this strikes me as very much influenced by stories like about the dragon Fafnir and his hoard of gold, and how it, dragon's gold has a corrupting power on those who behold it. It awakens in them a desire to possess it. And of course the dragon is like this. The dragon is a creature who desires above all else to possess a hoard of gold, at least in many of these tales. Certainly in Tolkien's work, that's very fully explicit in a character like Glaurung or Smaug. But the irony is, these dragons never use this gold. They don't really even appreciate it. They don't appreciate the craftsmanship of a work of jewellery that's been crafted by the dwarves. They don't really appreciate the beauty of a diamond or a gemstone. They don't even spend the gold to buy other things, right? They just want the gold for its own sake. They want the hoard for its own sake, and that is a very strange greed. And I suppose that's what it can often be like with a lot of things. Another way to put it be to commodify things. So you'll often get I'm trying to think of a really good example. So okay, so take books. Now the obvious purpose of a book is to read a book, but a lot of people buy books as status symbols, and indeed other people buy books for the purpose of owning that book, because maybe it's been signed by the author or it's a first edition. They'll pay thousands of pounds for it, never read the thing, but they want it because it, to possess it. They want to possess that thing because it belongs to a certain person or has a certain status attached to it. In a way, then you're kind of missing the point of the object, potentially. That it's actually meant to be something you engage with and read and enjoy the story. It's a medium to convey to you a story. You've turned the medium into the treasure itself. Now that maybe there's exceptions to this, where like there are beautiful calligraphy or illustrations, and the great manuscripts of the past, the Lindisfarne Gospels, the Book of Kells, and so on. The illumination is beautiful, but even then, you're appreciating the artwork, right? You don't buy it just to own it for its own sake. You buy it so you can enjoy and learn and love those beautiful images and read those wonderful stories. The dragon just devours and holds it all together, devours and possesses, and thus gets no real joy out of it. Doesn't get anything more than an accumulation of material wealth. The dragon lives for the reign of quantity. He has no conception of higher qualities in life than just having the most. Yes, William puts it a good way: being versus having. Being versus having. The dragon is a having thing. He has all these things, but he doesn't have any relationship with them to speak of, and they don't enhance his experience of the world. I guess the Ring of Power is a bit like this in the Lord of the Rings too. This is kind of an extension of it. Gollum loves and hates the ring, and he doesn't even use it in a powerful way. He uses it to turn invisible to help him kill things, but ultimately he just wants to have that ring for its own sake. There's no kind of conception in his mind of using it to take over the world. So he's just totally consumed by possessing this ring that often he doesn't wear or use. And that's often what we can become like. We appropriate a thing. We might marvel at it and have wonder at it at first in a generous way, but eventually we are kind of bring it down to I own this now, and trap it in a kind of cage. Kind of interesting. So the dragon is actually, it's a monster, but it's actually a monster that we are all capable of becoming. So then we got the Falcon and the Raven, and I think this is very much inspired by the stories of Woden or Odin, depending on which tradition you kind of want to look at here. And there's the tale of how Odin, to gain the runes of knowledge, or to gain a sip from the well of knowledge, it depends on the version or the variation of these stories, he was commanded to pluck out an eye and kind of give that as a sacrifice for this deeper knowledge. So he does so. And so we kind of get this here: pluck out mine eye so I can see the things that will soon come to be. So he doesn't just want knowledge in general, he wants knowledge of the future. Odin is a character who's possessed by the desire to know what's going to come, how the fate will turn out, particularly as he's had it told him from others, like the seeress, the prophetess, the Volupta, that he will be killed at the end of the world, at Ragnarok. All of what he's built will be destroyed. And so there's a sense in which he's trying to find out, is this certain? Is this definitely going to be the case? Is there any way out of it? So that's definitely part of Odin's character. In the dry desert slash by blue, is this the snow, right? Potentially. Or is it the sea or a river? I do this to help those of you in the Frore fjords of the Old North from my doom I tried to fight for. So yes, he's always trying to break away from his fate. And so that's why he wants to know the truth about it. Again, it's one of these tales. Can a man, can the gods master nature? Can anything overcome the great will of the world and providence and so on? It seems not. It seems not. At least not in Odin's case. But technically, we have not seen the end in which Odin must face Ragnarok, so we're still living in the timeline where this is all prophesied. So we do not know for sure if the fates will hold true for him. A couple of other things on this. So the sacrifice of an eye is quite interesting. Oftentimes in mythology and folklore, to gain knowledge or a treasure of some kind, wisdom, you have to give something up of yourself. And in so doing, through that kind of wounding, you grow in spirit and mind and virtue. There's a sense in which the kind of knocking down is the place where you're able to build those qualities to stand back up. In particular, the eye. The eye helps us see things as they appear in the sensory world, right? It gives you a visual representation of the world. But as we know, appearances can be deceptive, they can be illusory, and they don't always tell us what's really there, both in terms of the kind of physical world, but actually the truly deep things of the world that are going on aren't available to the eye. And so there is a sense in which the sacrifice of the apprehension of the visible world is enabling you to move into the world of the spirit, of things which are deeper and more fundamental, the essence of things. This is why Homer is often depicted, Homer, the great Greek poet, is depicted as being blind, because he saw things as they were, not as they appeared. Right, that seems to be the notion there. I think Ossian, the Celtic poet, also is described as being blind. So Odin is very much in that tradition of, well, he's not born blind. He's giving up the sight of the world. He's giving up his reliance on appearances to see things as they truly are and to understand things as they are. It's interesting because I don't think this is a stretch to connect here the common motifs of the sacrifice of either a king or of a princess, motifs for the kind of fertility of the people, the notions of a ritual, where if there's a bad king or there's a bad harvest, then the king is sacrificed, and then this kind of death of the king is the basis for the spreading of new seeds and new life to come forth, or from the princess, the virgin, or whatever, that by sacrificing this kind of font of virility or fertility, this then kind of infuses the land or rejuvenates or renews the people. There's a certain logic there, and we don't need to go into all the kind of mechanisms of sacrifice. Indeed, I think actually, I think to rationalize it loses some of its mysterious power, that it just has an intuitiveness to it, that we see in kind of through death, new life comes. Through the seasons, we see that. And so Odin giving up his eye is a kind of version of that. He's giving up some of his passive creativity, because our eyes help us to Through our eyes, we create whole worlds that we experience, right? It's the eye, the mind, and the object that is seen produce wonderful sensory experiences. He's giving up something which is very fundamental to him, not just for himself, but for the good of the world. He tells us this: "I do this to help those of you." So there's maybe some kind of illusion there. Very good poems, very interesting. Very much enjoyed it. So that's a kind of wee taster of two things from the Corncrake for September. There's still time to go and read it before the next edition comes out in October. So after this stream, why not head on to the corncrakemag.com, have a read of this issue and past issues. There's loads of good stuff. You don't need to read it all in once. And I think the value of short pieces is that you can read it in one sitting and experience the whole effect. Yeah, let me talk about that idea for a moment before we have time for some Q&A. I've been reading the literary theory of Edgar Allan Poe recently, and actually in next month's Corncrake there's going to be a big feature on all of this, forward to. The one thing that he talks about that I didn't mention in the foreword, so I think it's worth talking about here, is the reason why he wrote so many short stories and wrote stories which or poems that were short. Sorry, let me remove that. He argues that the purpose of writing is its effect. At least poetry and prose fiction. It's not about the story per se. It's not about exploring ideas. It's not about a message. It's about it producing a distinct, novel, unique, and coherent effect or impression upon the reader. And everything else serves that. So it might be the experience of beauty or some kind of creeping dread, the melancholic, whatever emotion or so on. He believes a story should have that kind of impression. Now, the thing that one of the things that's quite striking is he kind of works this out and says, okay, if you have a long story, it's really hard to read it in one go. That means that you are consistently breaking up the thing which is a catalyst to producing an effect, an impression, an emotion. And so each time you're having to reacquaint yourself with the story, get back into it. And as a consequence, it's harder, almost impossible, to give that unity of effect, which is the purpose of art. Or at least, and the longer a piece, the more drawn out, the less intense such an emotion can be. So he said, okay, you should write so that your poem or your story can be read in one sitting. Thereby, you are able to create in a very powerful way, in a short way, an intense experience of your choosing. And that is quite an interesting argument, because so many of the great works of literature are these huge long tomes. Think of someone like Dostoevsky or Tolstoy. They're massive books. Think of something like The Lord of the Rings. It's over 1,000 pages in total. It's not something you could read in one sitting, even one day, potentially. And so you lose something through that. Now, of course, the chapter structure allows you to kind of have like a segment which is able to create an impression, I suppose. But it undermines the overall experience potentially, because it's broken up by daily life and other activities. So we lose our emotional investment. I find this quite an interesting argument, especially as you think of something like music. Most songs are quite short, they're less than 5 minutes, and even longer works of music, a symphony, an hour perhaps, so you can enjoy it in a sitting. Concerts usually 2 hours, 2 to 3 hours. At, at most, a Wagnerian opera is 8 to 9 hours long. I've sat through one of these, and you have 3 breaks or whatever. So it's not ideal because you have to go out, but you can watch a whole opera pretty much in a day. You have to take the day off, of course, but you could do it. So I think there's and music is one of the most emotionally intense forms of art. It really impacts us. It bowls us. It stirs us because, well, there's lots of theories, but I think one that's pretty compelling to me, and again, it's a Schopenhauerian theory, is that music imitates or represents or reflects in sound all the quirks and motions of the will, of our desires. I think that I think that's quite powerful. I think that's quite powerful. Um, so as the music soars and grows and intensifies, so our desire grows and intensifies. Our desire for resolution, and the composer plays with this. They maybe lead us up and take us up to a point where we're begging for the return to the starting note to make the piece feel complete, and maybe they take us on a twist and then get back to it. The dynamic of desire and resolution, desire and resolution. Our souls mimic the emotion, the kind of musical emotionality of a piece, the melody, the harmonies. But it's in that kind of one sitting thing again. So I think that I think that there is a power in creating a distinct effect through a shorter piece. Um, does this work with visual art as well, like paintings or sculpture? It is one static reality that you would encounter in a moment, or a few minutes. You're not kind of going to spend 10 hours at it, or need to go away and then come back to experience the complete thing. Perhaps might break it, kind of breaks down a bit, but yes, again, you can still have a distinct impression from encountering a sculpture, rather than uh, feel it very drawn out. So I think that's a kind of an interesting theory, and certainly you could say that's the value of a short story, or poem, or something like that. And the long work of fiction or poetry is a kind of anomaly in the world of the arts. And I think that's quite a good thing, like to notice. Um, I think there's a few things that could be said. One is just that the benefit of a longer work is you're not tied to just creating one impression or experience. You can actually develop a much more rich tapestry of impressions upon your reader, and develop something then which isn't just kind of singular in its output in terms of how it makes you feel, but a much more human experience, maybe. Uh, Again, though, there's also the point that that what Poe is saying sounds good, but is creating an impression in somebody else the purpose of art? Is that the only reason why we read? Is that the main thing to consider for the artist? I think there are some who would disagree with that quite profoundly. So it's not to be just taken as a given that that's the point. But I do find it, uh, there is a strength to that as well. We don't want to just dismiss that this is something to be read or engaged with, and art does create impressions within us. It produces an effect, and it's a certain type of effect usually, even or a family of effects, rather than just nothing or anything when it's truly engaged with. Um, yeah, that's my little taster of Edgar Allan Poe out of the way. Yeah, read next month's Corncrake for more, and I will definitely be doing a video on Poe because I think he's great. I think he's wonderful. Let's see what folks have been saying. Distant Nights enjoyed the deceitful turkey. Nature both thwarting the character and providing the tomatoes. Bit more to the dualistic element. Yeah, that's a good point. I hadn't really thought about the tomatoes. But it is an important kind of addendum to the story. And yeah, the tomatoes. But then I also like the fact that the tomatoes are so good that he can't really have them ever again until much later in his life. It's and again, so he's really exploring desire, though, or our experience of often not being able to get things, and then they're just out of reach. Every time we get there, they're just slightly beyond us. But then if you ever do get your desires sated, that isn't the end of your life, and actually you go back to it, and there's always that. I don't know about you, but there's that fear of, oh, if I do this thing again, it won't be quite as good, and that somehow that will tarnish the previous experience or the memory of the previous experience, because you've tried to imitate what came before, and the conditions are different, of course, so you can't just repeat it and get the same result. I've had that actually with I was on a holiday to the island of Mull, which is on the west coast of Scotland. Marvelous place, really quite striking scenery, very heavy green trees and landscape in the middle of the western sea of Scotland. It was really beautiful and just a marvelous place. But we had spent many hours traveling there. We had to get a train across from Edinburgh to Glasgow, then up to Oban, which is the port where you get the ferry from. And then we had to get a bus from the ferry port all the way across the island. And, it was a fairly big island. It took about half an hour to an hour, that final leg. So we'd been traveling for several hours and hadn't had much food. And the bus drops you off straight in front of a restaurant, a fish restaurant. And you could see the fish being brought out of the water from the fishing boat straight into the kitchen. It was fantastic. So we get in and we all order fish and chips, of course, because we love fish and chips in this country. And oh man, maybe it was the combination of hunger, the desire to get to Oban being met and experience something authentic, the actual food itself, the aesthetic of the room, being in Scotland in the Western Isles. It was all these things combined to produce the most satisfying meal I've ever had and may ever have. But the idea of going back there, I'm kind of nervous about it because it's so built up in my mind now as this wonderful heavenly food that if I was to ever go back, it could never live up to that, and it would never be quite as good as what I had experienced then. So there is this kind of other whammy here. We have the desire which can never quite be met, and we then have the desire which is met, but it can't be met again, or we're scared can't be met again, in case it ruins the memory of that being met. So, yeah, there are all these kinds of inability to hang on to things, or the kind of paradoxes of desire in that story. Really quite cool. Distant Night. The internet probably makes a lot of those effects manyfold. I guess you mean in terms of the impressions of a story, perhaps. I mean, I don't know about Poe, but someone like George MacDonald would say, in terms of a story, that sure, it's not like each reader has the exact same experience of a story. They are going to think and feel different things in response to the tale, but they tend to be of a certain kind, right? If at least if the person comes from similar culture or understands the story They're going to have certain emotions and not others. When Frodo takes the ring for himself at Mount Doom, only a sick individual would start rejoicing at that point. No, most of us would feel horror and dismay at what's happened at this point in the story. So I think there is, although there'll be a range of emotional responses, they're always going to be bounded within what's set by the tale itself. Uh, Sometimes in ways which are unexpected as well, to be fair, but often we can kind of map out an emotional journey of the reader in the story. William, thank you for um, thank you for your comment. Let's get this up. On the other hand, could you not argue the opposite, namely that longer, more substantial artwork, precisely because it requires that repeated, almost ritualized mode of attention and effort, has greater transformative potential vis-a-vis the mind of the reader? Possibly. I see your logic here, like a kind of meditative practice or a prayerful practice, uh, you know, repeated every day, potentially, maybe multiple times a day. You have this kind of working on yourself through the words and actions that you're performing, and the realities you're engaging with, right? And habits start to form and infuse certain dispositions within you. So I can see that from that point of view. And certainly, if we tie this into what I was saying earlier about you can have a more well rounded or complex or uh, fuller kind of account of human experience conveyed to a person or a set of emotions or impressions, then yeah, you could maybe produce a richer transformation than a single emotion experienced in response to a short story. So I can see that. I guess I guess it just needs to be done well and sustain interest. Um, I would say too that we need to. I think there's a genuine question about Poe's talking about evoking an emotion. He's not talking about transforming your soul or your morality or infusing you with virtue. Other authors might want to say that kind of thing. But going on an emotional journey through a story and feeling various effects as you go through a story, is that going to transform you? Maybe, maybe. But I often think that actually, while we go through an emotional process, that doesn't necessarily mean that we have improved as people or gained virtues. It could depend on the tale, but I think we're kind of somewhat. There is a danger of confusing going on a spiritual journey in a kind of mystical contemplative way where the person isn't just reading a text but actively engaged in prayer and self-reflection and meditation and welcoming external agents to or powers or communing with something bigger than themselves to shape themselves, which is often characterized as some kind of journey, right? Maybe an ascent up a mountain or so on. That is quite a different activity from reading a fantasy book. Right? That one you are much more a passive engager, and the purpose is very different. For some people, it's just entertainment. Broadly speaking, it's to enjoy yourself or to have an enjoyable experience, even if it's a bit deeper than just mere pleasure or like the thrill of action. It could be the themes or something like that. So I mean, I'm undecided on this question. I used to be quite strong on the idea that fiction can be transformative for the reader, and certainly, I think certain values or ideas we can kind of encounter them and experience them through a story, but whether they embed themselves within you maybe requires something more if they are to remain after you've read the story. Good question though. Like, I I I find it difficult to truly answer. I guess maybe the proof, or not the proof, but the thing which I'm questioning is I've not come across many people who so people might read the Bible or do like a meditation, and they do seem to be changed, right, in some way or another. Not everybody, not everyone who reads the Bible is changed, but people have had like religious experiences or conversion experiences or big spiritual transformations over a period of time, because there's a certain activity and intention going on there. I've not really met anybody who's read a book and have found themselves altered in quite fundamental ways. Um, Maybe if they've read a book a lot, or a set of books with similar values, they might have a certain worldview which is gradually formed, perhaps, uh, and they're able to see things in a certain way. But I don't think it's a common thing, and I don't think it's nearly as powerful as I've certainly suggested in the past. But there may be something more there that I'm missing. Maybe a repeated exposure, perhaps, would be the thing. But we're bombarded by so much media and other forms of culture today that one book would not be enough by itself either. And I see you agree. Well, it was good. It was a good question, and thank you for it. Um, yes. So, and yes, distant light just brings in another point. And people sometimes disjointed their interactions, longer ones. Yeah, it's if you've got a longer interaction, it can be quite difficult to maintain it. And certainly, I've been reading a story, gone away and done a bunch of stuff, maybe a few days away from it, and then I find it hard to get back into it because I'm not in that headspace anymore, which was kind of required to keep my interest in that. So, it can be really difficult if you if you have a routine, perhaps that helps as well. Well, we'll just give a few minutes for any more questions. In the meantime, I will just give a little update on a couple of things. So, as I said, there's another week or so before next month's Corncrake is out, and that's going to be a really um, great installment. We have a couple of other things in the works that you will hear more about soon. Some things which will be available to purchase in the future from the Corncrake, which is very exciting. And otherwise, if you are interested in submitting anything to the Corncrake, if you want to write a story or provide a little bit of a foreword to another story or something like that, then please get in touch at corncrakemag.com. There is an email, and the editor, Shield Maiden, would be more than happy to hear from you. Well, I don't see any more questions, so let's call it there, chaps. I've really appreciated your time, and it's been fun to read some stories. It's nice to get away from things and just read a tale, and also just to have a bit of a discussion and see where the discussion takes us. Oh, I see William has one more. So this will be our last comment. So the ideas or worldview afforded by a story are windows or looking glasses into another mode of being. To actually inhabit and participate within it requires action and choice. Yeah, I agree with this. This is a really good way to put it. I often feel when I read Tolkien that things feel. I can feel the deep truths of moral good and evil. It feels obvious and concrete and real and very easy to determine. And I often want to capture that in my life. Sometimes it's broken through, but to actually to experience the world in that way would require me to kind of live a different way than is possible in this society. maybe there's certain choices I could make for it to be clearer. But certainly they are a lens to see the world in a certain way, as kind of shaped by the author. So I think that's a good way to put it. They're a kind of mass or a telescope, a portal for a time where we can experience a world in a certain mode. Yeah, that's a really good way to put it. Thank you, William. Well, thank you, my friends, for watching the Merry Corncrakes. I look forward to seeing you around soon. And I should say as well that if you don't know, I started with a bunch of folks, the Pendragon Foundation. We are trying to restore castles in Britain. We're just in very early days. We're really trying to build up what we're doing and build our infrastructure and get more volunteers so that when the right castle comes along, we're ready to go. You can find out more at the Pendragon Foundation YouTube channel. We're also on Twitter at Pendragon.org. And there's going to be lots of exciting updates in the future with that too. So I'd be very grateful if you haven't already, you go and check that out. After you've read the Corncrake mag, of course. Have a good evening or day, whoever you are, wherever you are, and we'll see you next time. I'll play you out with a song that I used to play quite a lot on here. I was able to do that before, and I felt like it needs to be reheard. So